This is a extendable steerable step deck. We're going to go through the overview first, then we're going to go through all the subsystems and how they work. This particular trailer has this auxiliary hydraulic hookup, so you can either use the power pack that's here or use this. The way you select it is with this selector valve. So with this one is PTO use, so the power comes from here. If you do this, then it's going to be the power pack. Use this sparingly, just because a lot of the PTO hydraulic systems are sometimes contaminated as the pumps wear out, and the steering system is very sensitive to dirt. So I would use this very sparingly. I would use the power motor that's in here. Moving along, we got the regular glad hands. Underneath here, there's the turntable that's right here. That's a steering wedge block that's going to be wedged into the fifth wheel. We got the alignment arrow, and then the steering system extends to the back here. We'll go through that in a bit. Inside here, we have the pony motor, battery. This is the steering block that's here. There's another valve there. These are the steering controls to turn it on and off. Remote plug-in, the two circuits for your steering, and then this one is anytime you do a function that gives you the pressure at the pump. Got the hydraulic tank here with the level gauge. We're parked on an angle, so it's a little low. Spare tire rack. Here we have the hookups at the gooseneck. So you have your air electrical hookups. Here you have the hydraulic one. This is a loop here, just because whenever you start the engine, the hydraulic oil needs to circulate. So this way loops there. This is here because there's going to be another function further down. So this is going to hook up into here. So that's going to complete the loop. Once that's hooked up, we're going to do that in another step. This is the loading bunk that can be placed anywhere along the first stage of the beam. And under here we have the air hookups to unlock each of the beam sections. Here we have the glad hands hookup, electrical. Finally, we have the controls here for the hydraulic legs. That's going to be used to raise the trailer to extend, to take the pressure off. Come back here. This is the air ride control. Very easy dump and fill like this. You have a gauge here. You would correlate the pressure with this load chart here. You just multiply out how many axles you have to give you a very good estimate on how much is in your air ride system. This toolbox here has all of the shims and the hose management that's going to be used to, when you're going to be extending, this hose is going to be what's unlocking those pins. This back. The Tridem group, obviously you can't tell right now, but they're going to be the steering axles. Back here, we have the connection for the beacon light. This is for the remote control that's here. This oversized sign, what you do is you just reverse it to say oversized on it. This here is the alignment arrow for the axles. We're a bit out like this, so we didn't line it this morning. So that's not too bad, but normally you would want to have this flush going down the road. Got your flag holders here. Got an auxiliary toolbox here for any other odds and ends, straps, chains. This is the Steerable connection, so it's a quick connection with 4 ports. That's for the steering. It's got 4 hoses because there's 2 cylinders for each side. Later, this is the hydraulic leg. Somebody forgot to put this in, so we're gonna put this in for them. Locks, there's dual locks. There's locks on this side as well. Coming here, this is the connection point that goes to this. So it's got all the hoses. When you'd stretch out, you would go and connect that. very important is this feature here. This is the loops. I'm going to talk this a couple of times just because it's so important to make sure that whenever the coupler does turn, it has a place to recirculate the oil. We call this a bypass block. Always make sure to either you're connected there or you're connected to the bypass block. Never connected to nothing. Spare tire rack, auxiliary toolbox up top here. Now we're going to back to fifth wheel block. That's if you've never hooked onto the trailer before and it got towed by somebody. Each fifth wheel is different. Even when they wear out, they're different. So it's very important that when you hook on a new trailer, you back it out, because you might hook onto it and it's too tight and you might be stuck to, well, you might just be stuck and having a hard time to uncouple it. So, but if you're the last person to hook onto this, you won't have to do this step. But we're going to show you how. Take these lock pins out. This plate out. What I like to do is right in front, there's the block ends, and if you put that flush, you're pretty well as back out as you're going to be. Now you see the bolts hanging out here, so this will be able to slide back just like that, and that's more than flush. Put this back in so that we just don't lose it. Now, whenever you check before you go out, make sure to check all these lines here. Up here, make sure the top's not closed here. And then if these legs, they will bleed off at night, especially if somebody forgot the chain. It would bleed off at night, probably wind up touching the ground. So just make sure to come in here, check both sides, check on the other side for the chain. If not, you would connect this hose to the front and just bring this up like this. This is wherever you want the trailer to do, not what the leg wants to do. So I want the trailer to go down, so these legs go up. You would do that. Go up like this. We'll check the hydraulic connection. So the way this is set up right now, the block isn't tight, but it's as if you were hooking onto it and you're just bringing it somewhere, and you're not using any auto steer. So you would put this in bypass, very important. If this isn't in bypass, the oil has nowhere to go in front, and then that coupler is going to turn, and the weakest link is going to let go. Either a mechanical connection, hose might burst. So just really make sure to connect this block here. It's not recommended that you put it in automatic mode when you're all shorting up. So just come back here and make sure you did this. Even if this is out like this, it's still deadheaded in here. So this right now is all locked up. So make sure that nobody in the parking lot told you to pass one. Make sure this is locked like this. And now you'll be ready to go on the road and get where you need to go. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna adjust the block. So that's the first step to go into automatic steer. You're gonna need a ratchet with a 1 1/4. Make sure you have an extension because it's pretty far in once you're all hooked up. So if you have even longer, it'll probably help out too. You just need a 1/2 inch drive. You don't need a very big ratchet because this is just to snug it up. So what we're gonna do is, before I start the engine, I'll explain what needs to happen. So we're gonna do, this is the controls for the steering. So we're just gonna put remote use. And what that does is if I turn, so make sure to put the remote use, then the remote. You can hear the valves now. If I do the opposite, so if I turn on the remote, then this doesn't work. It's this receiver needs to boot up first for it to connect to it. So it's just important to have that little distinction. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this on, turn the remote on, and I'm gonna go underneath, and I'm gonna remove all those clips and plates. I'm gonna snug it up as much as I can, and then I'm gonna use the Honda engine, and I'm gonna go back and forth like this. And what that's gonna do is just gonna rock that coupler back and forth, and I'm gonna be able to ease that wedge all the way in. So when you do move on the road, which is you're going taking corners, so if you tighten it to one side and then you wind up not taking the slack on the other side, the trailer is going to wind up dog tracking. So it's important to really snug that in. Once it's snug, you just back it off a quarter turn, you put all the clips back in, and that's it. So I'll do that. This is flipped up. It's fully adjusted. Make sure to turn everything off. Same thing with this. I want to show as well too that this switch here, this very last one here, that does steering as well. You have the wired remote here, so if this ran out of batteries or you lost it, you can still take this, plug it in here, and go underneath and do the exact same maneuver. That's it. Line the front coupler and the rear, and also pressurize the system. First thing to do is whenever you go to connect these hoses, you don't want any pressures in the system. So right now M1, M2 is both steering circuits. Right now there's pressure in them. We did a maneuver with it, it built pressure. So right now it'd be very hard to go and connect or disconnect that on the other side. So you just come here, take a check. There's a red button back here, and what that does is it takes out the pressure. So we just do this, and now the pressures are at 0 on top there. So what we're gonna do is walk around, make the connection. Red button on the side, right here. So you just press down, be able to, like that. Normally you'd be extended out when you would do this maneuver, because you don't want to steer when you're all closed up, just because it might surprise you and swipe the front of a car. Nobody likes that, especially the boss. This one, same thing here. There's going to be a red button. Just take that out. And then you can't mix these up. There's these 3 dowel pins. So there's this one's in the middle, and these ones are offset. So if you try to put it the other way, it just won't go in. So there's no chance of mixing it up. Do this. might be pressure in here, so it might be a bit tough, but oh, this one's easy this morning. This is the connection for the remote control. So if you're in the back and you have it connected, it doesn't work, check this first. Put that in there. Just gonna tuck this in for now. And make sure to always have these hydraulics connections. Make sure to always have them connected to something. If they're always connected to something, either a deadhead or a hose, you know for sure that you are not locking this system up. It's important, always something connected. We're gonna go on the other side. So now what we do now that we're connected to the bypass, I put air into the trailer so the wheels can move free. You would get in the truck, you would get somebody to get in the truck. You can do this alone, it's a bit of a pain. You would just move up and you would align these arrows. Right now I'm at the back one. You want to be in the middle one to get best results for sure. So what I would do is normally I would get in and I would just move it up just that little bit just to get it right to that middle arrow. So you always set the front first. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the back. The way this works is you take this one here, this one switch, and I'm going to go align the back. So you turn this on, turn the remote on. We could use the wired remote now that we connected everything. So we're going to start this engine. So this alignment arrow, so what I do is I'll press either one side, see it's going to one side in order to the other. What you want to do is you want to release all the brakes, and then I like to go a little further front and back. What that does is once the brakes are released and you went forward and back like that, there might be any tension in the system. So all that tension is now gone. So now you're able to, when you do set off, when we're going to shut everything off, it's got the best chance of tracking true, because if it's all bound up one side and you shut everything off, you set off, it might go to the one side and want to steer over or dog track to one side or the other. So what do? You can do that. Also too, if you're really stretched out far and there's quite a bit of crown in the road, you can go ahead and either have it so it wants to climb, the back end wants to climb just because it's so far out. You can do this, shut it off. These trailers are fine to do that. You can adjust it kind of however you see fit. We're pretty short right now, so we're just gonna put it flush like this. Back to front. Shut the remote off, and before I shut this off, just want to show you that these pressures now they were at zero. We bled it. Now anytime that you work this system, it's going to want to go between 500 to 1,000 psi. We're a little over, it's fine. It's whenever you're up to 2,000 that you want to maybe start to either start the engine, wiggle the axles, and then these will work them down, or you can come up here and then you can release that red button. The reason why you want pressure in the system is that the rear axles, the whole hydraulic system is like a big spring with all the hoses. So whenever we put pressure in them, they're already pre-taut, so the spring is already stretched. So what that does is it makes the system very rigid as far as for tracking. So if these drop down, your trailer is going to wind up dog tracking to one side or another, be just not as responsive. It's still going to steer. It's just it won't be as exact as when you have pressure here. So if this drops, so if one of them drops, that you might have a blown hose, or there may be some check valves. Just repressurize it, check for leaks. These hold their pressures pretty well during the day. The only issue is that if you pressurize it, say during the night when it's cool, and then you go during the day, that these might have dropped down, or if you pressurize it in the morning and it gets hot during the day, these might climb. Like I said, you can always go to 2,000 psi. And I recommend that anytime you stop, you just come here, you take a check of this, you check your alignment arrows, just to double check everything so nothing went weird on you. And also, the last thing I want to mention is this switch here, and not this two. This one is when we're going to do full manual. Don't pressurize the system, both of them on. The reason why that is, whenever we have just the one on here like this, this one pressurizes both ends of the system. Whenever you do this, it uncouples the front and back. So you want to make sure that you only use this one here, so you pressurize both halves of the system. Sometimes you do this, you pressurize it, you put these switches down, and the pressure is going to drop. It's going to do a little kick, and then, or you might be offset to one side. So just make sure they have just this one. So we just see now is the trailer to go around with the truck, and now he's back straight. So when we aligned it straight. So this has come back to straight here. So the trailer going down the road, it's gonna want to go straight. So if you offset it, it's gonna stay offset. If we go in front, we come here, you can see the alignment arrow. It's just off a little bit. It's pretty sensitive whenever it gets to there. It's pretty well in the middle. There might be just a little off just because we finished the turn, but the two are synced together. I'm gonna look in the toolbox next. These pressures, they're pretty well the same when they started. If these have dropped off, then there's either there was a big temperature change. If they dropped off in a short time span, say an hour or two, and there wasn't a temperature difference, then you'd have an issue. If one of these is at 0, it might mean that there's a mixed up line. Somebody blew a line and you put a new one and you put it in the right spot. So just make sure both of these are up with the right pressure, and then that's it for an automatic one. What we're going to do next is going to be the full manual steer. What that's going to do is essentially uncouple the truck from the trailer, so the steerman or the person having remote control or any steering, so you can steer from here as well. This is more just to make sure everything's okay. You can't steer from here, that's obviously dangerous. Wire pull at the back. Use this. So whenever you're using any of these and you have these two switches up, so most of the time we've had this up here. Whenever you do this one here, it essentially uncouples the front and back. So what we're going to do is have these two on, the motor working. The truck's going to go straight, and then we're going to be steering essentially zigzag out of it, or you need to swing out really wide to make the turn, then this is obviously the recommended way of doing it. So you would come in, you would place the trailer off to the side, or delay steering, so you make the truck over, and then you wait last minute, then swing your trailer over, however you see fit to make sure that it goes over that corner. So this is obviously the preferred method. Whenever you do this, you will have to realign it. It's obviously very simple. You line the front, you line the back. So what we're going to do is so these two switches are on. Turn this on. You can hear the valves. Turn the engine on. Whenever I turn with these, I go to one side like this. So I have control over the axles. So I'm going to signal him to go now. So what we're going to do next is on this assisted mode. So what we're going to do is typically you try to do this during backups or very small maneuvers going on and off the road. You don't want to have this and do like a big maneuver with it, because if we steer these axles all the way over to one side and then the truck steers as well, then you're going to wind up bottoming out some cylinders and it's going to go over relief. It's not great for the system, so try to avoid it. We only use these whenever we align the system, previous step, or whenever you're backing up. It's very handy. Wants to back up and sneak it in a corner, you can have this, and then so the truck does most of the work, and then all this is doing is when we're turning on the valve, it's either adding or taking out fluid in one side or another. So I essentially skew over the trailer over to one side or another, but the two systems are still connected together. So what I'm going to do now, he's backed up and he's just steered over to one side. I'm going to put him back straight and he's going to continue backing up, and when he's going to turn, it'll turn on the other way without me touching the remote. So I'm going to do that right now. Right now he's not moving, so I'm moving the steering like this. So let's just say I leave it there and I turn this to off. I tell him to back up. And the trailer stays straight. Now he's going to turn over to one side. What we're going to do next, we're going to extend the trailer. So there's quite a bit of steps to get the trailer prepared for it first. Number one is we're going to go on the other side, disconnect the lines. Before you disconnect the lines, you have to make sure to take off this pressure, just because whenever you do disconnect it, you can disconnect it without much of an issue. It's when you're going to go to put it back on, it's going to be very stiff. So just reach in the back here. Barely feel it, it's a little tall, but there's a red button. You'll see these pressures here, like that, and then they went down like this. Go on the other side. Take this. Oh, can't forget this wire. This is the remote wire. sure to have something connected to it. So this doesn't have anything connected. So if you start steering one way or another, you can build up the pressure inside. Very important. Put this back to here. Hydraulic is going to return back to the coupler one way or the other. Just stays here, and so we don't lose it. Like this. So that's going to do on this side. Just do a double check. If the chain's loose, it isn't. Probably have started this up, taken this out. We'll have to do it afterwards. Next, what we'll do is we'll take out these coils. These coils are here for whenever you're braking as short, you have a better response. So right now we'll just shut this top off. Got all of these. Now into here, quite a bit of bag of tricks. These are to hold the wires on all the plumbing on each side of the caissons. This is the hose to unlock. So air is supplied to this. There's another ball valve all the way inside. Put this one on. That's just in case that you knock this one on the road. There's two of them. And then lastly, the shims. I would bring out all the shims whenever you're first loading. There'll be a bit of some trial and error. What we'll do is we'll just take one out and we'll show you how to put it in. Take this, bring it close. So this particular trailer needs to have a hydraulic power to it to extend it, because these legs here, they're going to take the pressure off. So what we need to do now is connect hoses to it. Normally, well, some trailers will be able to have the power pack here, so we're able to extend it and have it so that we'd have absolutely nothing connected between the gooseneck and where we're extending. So it's just be absolutely sure to take your time with this to be sure that when you do it, that you lay this out correctly. When you do extend it, it doesn't kink on you or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these now. Take this. Start with the air. Now the last is the hydraulic power. This is the loop. Probably mentioned this in the other sections. So this is where we're going to connect it. So right now it's going to go back to the engine. What we want to do is to go into the trailer and back so that we supply power to it. So these ones you can't reverse them. Just hold it like that. Connect this one first. It's probably, there might be some pressure that's locked into here. Seldomly, if you really can't connect them, you can come in here with a hammer and just tap on them. It makes a big mess. Hopefully we can get it in here. There we go. Now we're able to connect this one. And since we're connecting everything, the hydraulics, we're gonna go and connect the air as well too. What that's gonna do is, right now it's full of air. You could probably unlock and lock both of these air locks without supplying air to the trailer. But sometimes there's not quite enough air pressure to pull that one lock out and it seems like it's stuck. So for this particular one, since you're doing the hydraulics, I would connect them all. And then you're sure that you're not going to have any air issues for supply. Now what we're going to do is just lay this out, catch the least amount of mud. So what I'll do next is I'll start the engine. I'm going to lift up this leg, so just to get everything ready. And this here is whatever you want the trailer to do. So I want the trailer to go down so the legs will go up. And then just like this. What I do is I'll just hold it so I can make sure the other side's up as well. I'll go do the other side. Side now. Turn this tap on. I'm going to take the legs, forward and around, make sure they both go. Now what we're going to do is take the air and put it, you want to put it on the first one here. So you always go from your front back. Do this here. What I do is I always start when it's at the bottom like this. Whenever we do pick up the caisson, it's got the best chance of it opening up. Sometimes if they don't open up, just kind of put it right in the middle. You'll see it will take out the pressure and just, you can back up and go forward just to jiggle it out. These maxis are pretty good. They pull just as hard as they push. So this will give you the best chance. If that doesn't work, it's probably because you don't have enough air. Make sure to open up that tap, or the brakes are set at the back. You should be able to do both of them with enough air in the trailer, but since you're connecting this, it's always nice to do this. So he's going to spike it. And I'm just going to look here. I'm going to bring it up. And then you see that second one just lifted. We're going to do it. And the whole time we're extending is we're taking a look at that gap, and we're just trying to maintain it because these things have arch in it. And as you go out, it'll get stiffer because the arch wants to come out of it. So what you're going to do is you're just going to go up like this, and you're going to go back down when you're going to finish your arch. What I do is I'm going to signal to him.
to do to close the valve. Take this out, and I'm going to tell them to back up. Just make sure these went in. Make sure to check the other side, they're both in. If not on the road, they could swing in and out. Usually when you start wiggling, they'll definitely go back in, but just to make sure that there's nothing loose or anything like that. Now we've done this, you have to put this on so it doesn't drag on the ground. And we'll do the second glad end. Put that up. There's just take little bolt down. Thing here, we're going to take the valve off. So we didn't hear it lock, so we're going to tell them to back up. Oh, I guess it was right next to the hole. So what we'll do now is we'll put a shim in. So right now we have this here. So this crack, this gap isn't big enough here. Put this in. There's different sizes of shims. So the first caisson's a lot smaller. So this one is the correct width. Make sure you put the correct width in. So lift this up. Then you'll be able to go past it, just because these, you can stack these. So if this isn't enough, and I'll explain why this wouldn't be enough or too much. So you could stack these, just make sure they're the right width. If not, they're gonna wanna either dent this top plate or bow out the top one. We'll just put this in. Actually, what we will do is we'll take it out and we'll put it down without it. So right now you can see the trailer has a certain arch to it, and then so right now it's got an arch that's, let's just use some Mr. Bean measurements here, up to my waist here. And what happens is that whenever you do load, depending on where you load, this one's going to be about 15 feet from the front or 10 feet from the front. Right at the back, there's these big plates. What that's going to do, the trailer's a big spring, and it's going to want to settle down like this. And what the shims do is that they pre-camber the beam a bit more. So when it sits down, you want it to have it flat or a bit of camber in it. In some rare instances, you can have it so that it's cambered. It doesn't give it any more strength. It just essentially pre-tensions it just gives it so that there's more room to bow down. So the trailer doesn't get any stronger. It just makes it so that when it starts out higher and bow down. These are made to flex quite a bit. So if you load it to with the correct weight, everything will be fine. So what I'll do now is add my measurement, which is waist high. I can take these off the ground like this, so this hasn't moved. What I'll do is I'll put this shim back in. A bit more. Since it was easy, I didn't do it high enough. There we go. So now that's in. All of a sudden, this beam now, I would say, came out about 5 inches. Now, I know that I'm using some very vague measurements. It's because this is the bit of an art form of the trailer. So So whenever you do get a new loading, or you first get the trailer, what you're gonna do is you're gonna put something on there. You're gonna probably have your best guess on shims, and then you're gonna load it on and say, you know what, you know, it's a little too low, it's a little too high. So then what you do is you come and put some in or take some out. If you want to re-shim the middle, you have to close it back up, able to lift that or put it in. If you have a big forklift in the yard, you can go and put some in as you see fit. And so that's why it's a bit of an imprecise thing, just because every trailer has just that little bit different. And sometimes when you camber it out, an inch over 100 feet makes a difference. So just those slight variations will make that happen. These are the fine tuning things, just kind of like the strings on the guitar. You got the adjustments. These are that on the trailer. So now that we've been all extended out, we'll be shimming. And we can take this, take the dirt out of the shoes. Obviously today we did a couple of good marks there, but put this back in. Do that for the other side too. Make sure that they're both in like that. Now we're gonna do how to store the wires on, the cabling. So there's two different sizes of these on here. Narrow and the wide one. What you're gonna do is put the wide on the wide case on and the narrow one on the narrow one. So I'll just do this one here. Like this here. Put this in. Now, some people, what they do is they actually just put this right in the middle like this, and they'll put a bungee cord, hold it around. You guys wrap it around. It's almost a matter of preference at this point. We supply these just because they're really foolproof. They do sometimes tend to move around. You could probably tie them down here like this with a bungee, just so you don't, if you ever see them move around, or you can tie them on just like this here. It's however your project works. Sometimes you have any issues, sometimes you do. So it's completely up to the driver to do the hose management. We think that this is the best case. Also, some guys lose them sometimes and you want to get stuck. So you just get a big pack of bungees and you can lay it on the top, so long as your load doesn't rub this. All right, so now that we've all been stretched up, went ahead and I installed these. These are the hose management. On this side, there's a hydraulic. On this side, there's the air and also the hydraulics for the legs. So install these. There's two sizes, because this caisson, first one is wider. This one's narrower. One last thing is, probably before you do this, you would, depending on the loading, you can move this here. The way this is done is right under here. There's a pin, and this uses the same locks as the big air pins. So you take this out, take this pin out here. There's one on the other side like this. And then what you do is you just tie ratchet binder here. So you can just put your grab hook right on here like this. And then you could set it out to the back end. And then you can just simply walk it back. And when you close up, you don't need to do anything. Just make sure to have these pins out here. And when it does close up, you can have the caisson push on this, so then it'll push on it, so it's actually easier to slide it to its other spot. So I'm going to take this, put it back in. All right, and once this is all hooked up, check your pressures, align the axles, fill it with air, make sure nothing's gonna rub on the ground, and you're ready to go on the road. We're gonna close the trailer back. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start the engine. That's gonna provide power to the back. Then we're gonna start it up. We're gonna lift it up. We're gonna put it in all stages. Make sure that you have your air and hydraulic line all connected up. Make sure it's out of the way so the truck doesn't run over it. So we'll start up. Make sure the trailer's full of air. We're going to be spiking it today. You can do both ways. So I just turned the valve on. There's one in the toolbox. Those are both on. Okay. And now what we're going to do is just take the chain out, secure it. Make sure not to forget this because you probably will break it. This is just so it doesn't drop on the road. What we're going to do is we're going to lift up, get rid of the shim. Set it back down. And we're going to signal. Close the valve. Tell them to go backwards. Make sure lock is closed. And this one doesn't have shims. You probably would if you were loading something. So just make sure. What I like to do here is bring the hose back too. Make sure we stop it over it. Okay, so now they're all hooked up. All that's left now to do is to lift up the legs. I forgot. ahead and do the other chain later on. So what I was going to do now is going to disconnect all the air connections from here to here, coil it back up on top, put everything away, and then we'll be ready to go on the road. Okay, so we're going to talk about the maintenance on this trailer. It's pretty straightforward. So there's all the regular trailer maintenance stuff, plus obviously all the steering. Coming in here first, you got the Honda engine. So you're going to run 10W30 in the summer, 5W30 in the winter time. I would just put the summer oil in it just because they don't run for very long. They don't really get that hot. Here you check the pressures just to make sure that they keep up snuff. It's not so much of a as needed thing, not so much a yearly maintenance or anything like that. You just make sure that this can always keep its pressure. Just whenever you do pressurize it, if it doesn't keep its pressure over a couple of hours, then there's something wrong. If there's a big temperature swing and doesn't keep its pressure, then just recharge it. But if the temperature is relatively constant during the day, it might go up or down, but as long as you can keep it, make sure this is both off. Check the battery. Sometimes if they drain the battery and then you start it back up by the crank, these coils might not fire off because there's not enough voltage. So just make sure that this battery is happy all the time, so that you don't get in that situation where you think that it's charged enough, but in actual fact it's not enough to either put that big coil on in the back here. So that's a problem that sometimes we have. Moving underneath, there's quite a bit of maintenance items under here. The fifth wheel doesn't need grease because it always pivots on that big turntable, but the turntable itself needs to be greased. So we have the remote grease banks, and then here as well, that's to feed all of the steering system. Under here you have these brass slides that are in here. These are the items that would definitely wear out the quickest out of this whole steering system, just because this gets pushed and pulled and you see there's a bunch of dirt on it. So this is going to go inside here and it's going to make a nice paste to wear everything out the quickest. Whenever the guys don't grease this, these brass will wind up sticking to this very much so, and then they might actually wind up busting these bolts here. There's some on both sides. What do you do? I'd say about once a month, probably, so every 5 times you'd grease it. I'd grease it every week. You have these big adjustment nuts here. So there's one on this side, well, they're both on the passenger side, but there's one in front too. And what that does, it just squares up the brass flat bar all the way up to this, just to minimize slack. So you can minimize slack in the front there, and then back here with these brasses. These lines that go to it feed the grease right through and onto both faces. So this is a very big maintenance point, that if you're gonna grease anything, this is the first thing to do. If it doesn't need grease, make sure that it does. So take it apart, push some new grease in it. This one needs to be happy for sure. The second ones are these here. There isn't much of a seal on there, so that just needs to make sure that you flush out all the water and all that. Each cylinder has 2 on each end, just like any other cylinder. Just quickly, that under here, the cylinders, there's these bleed ports. That's going to be in the troubleshooting video. If you ever want to bleed the system, they're on the cylinders, also at the back too. So that concludes under the gooseneck here. Go all the way back. It's regular landing gear. Make sure to, I like to open this up and put some ATF in there. It doesn't matter if it wants 2 or 3, as long as it's oil. Just because it goes down the screw, makes it a lot easier. If you put grease in the winter time, they get really, really stiff. This hydraulic oil here, this is ISO 15. It's a bit low, parked on an angle. You want to keep it to 1/2 to 3/4. So just keep that happy like that. Don't put anything else than ISO 15. Just because if you go to heavier weight in the winter time, the steering gets very stiff. So we run that oil, and there's not a lot of heat that gets poured into these systems. So just keep it at that weight. Next big maintenance item for the extendable, there isn't anything. There's no rollers or anything. So, but coming back here, you have all of these grease fittings. So you would go and then ideally you'd be in a pit. You'd wind up putting a grease gun, listening for some water and making sure that they do come out to do everything. So on there's the slack adjusters, the cam tubes, and then also now there's the whole steering system. So there's the two kingpins when you steer. There's going to be the tie rod end, so on both ends of that. Then there's the big main pivot that the tie rods go onto it, that they push and pull like that. So the big pivot has two grease fittings. And then lastly, there's these two pivot arms that they in turn move the pivot from the first one. So all of the things that pivot has a grease fitting. That's why there's so many of them there. So this axle are essentially the same. This one here is the master axle, so it has extra grease fittings. That's for the hydraulic cylinders that do the pushing and pulling. Make sure that you don't forget them. This one's pretty easy. It's all in one place. But if it didn't have this, just make sure to go underneath. Wherever there is a pivot point, there definitely is a grease point. Make sure to go through that. You got the oil in the hubs, depending on what it came with. I recommend synthetic. Could just be 80-90. They could be grease filled. This one's just 80-90 that's in it. Just make sure that it's happy, it doesn't run dry. You can check at the back. Typically greasing, normal trailer, I'd say it's about you would ideally want a week. You could probably stretch out to a month. This one it needs to get done every week. And if it doesn't operate, then obviously you don't have to do it. But if it's operating, make sure to grease it every week. You're gonna save yourself so much headache down the road. Just because all these steering components move all the time. It's kind of like the truck at the front. If you don't grease it, it's gonna wear down really quick. This is the exact same thing here. If you don't grease them, they wind up even seizing on themselves in some cases. So just make sure to go through it. Keep everything happy and lubed up. That's it.